Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the great pleasure of Claire Smith on the show. Good morning to you, Claire.
Morning. Hi. How are you doing?
Good to see you. I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about you. You're an endurance athlete, and by endurance, you've done what you call Ironman triathlons, but not just one Ironman. You've done what you call double, triple, quin, Decca, and in fact, in 2019, you did a double Decca triathlon, which is basically 20 Ironman triathlon distances in one go, which sounds insane, and it really is. And that's a 48-mile swim, just over 2,000 miles on a bike, and then 20 marathons just to finish it off at the end. That's endurance, but you're not only an endurance athlete. You put that passion to a business. You have an events business where you called the Brutal Extreme Triathlons. We organise such events all over this country, on the south coast, in Wales, where you do double Ironmans as such, and also an author. You've written your first book, Becoming Brutal, which is effectively an autobiography of your life as an endurance athlete. And today we're going to be exploring and understanding a little bit the why behind all that, but also some lessons in resilience of how to keep going from your own sort of endurance feats, but also within your own business as well. Because obviously you've been impacted in the last couple of years with COVID as well. But before we get into that, Claire, I'd love to understand, what do you love about what you do?
There's a mad part of me, I think, that just sees challenges that I don't think I can do, and I'm just drawn to them. I really enjoy the process of seeing them, researching them, understanding more about them, seeing how it's possible potentially for me to do it, breaking it down, and then just setting myself up really to start training for it. I just enjoy all of that. And whether I complete it or I don't, it's just that process of seeing something new, thinking, can I do it? And, getting on with it, I guess.
Mm. So going back to, I guess, almost the beginning of all this, and obviously you didn't set out initially to go and do sort of 20 Ironmans in a row and all the various things you've done along the way. And you've sort of built up, as like anything, we get more confident, we get more experience at something, and we want something more challenging. But what is the why behind all this, doing such extreme events? Because these are extreme. We're not just talking, doing a marathon is a big deal. It's a huge deal. And we've just had recently the London Marathon, and it's a huge deal to do a marathon.
Absolutely.
But to do that and all the stuff you do, it's pretty extreme. So I'd like to understand, what's the why, what's the purpose, what got you into all that?
I think I always knew, well, from quite an early age, that I was an extreme person. Early on, I was quite aware that I'd got an addictive personality. And obviously, I used to have issues with addiction, substance abuse and things like that. So it was kind of starting afresh, really, I think, with the endurance stuff, and sort of using that, I suppose, as swapping addictions, if you like. And I knew that I had to do that because, the way that my life was going at the time wasn't particularly healthy. And so I wanted to, do something. And I guess the endurance stuff fitted in nicely with that, and helped me move forward in a healthier, healthier. It is healthy, but sometimes like ultra endurance stuff isn't necessarily the most healthiest thing, but because you can get pretty broken along the way. But yeah, I guess it was that, really. It was understanding my personality as an addictive person, and applying it to something healthier, basically.
And did you at the time realize that doing something like these ultra events, endurance events, would satisfy that addictive behavior in you, and that's why you sort of chose that? And did that help you get out of the addictions you were?
It took me a long time, actually. I first started running when my daughter was born. She's 25 now, so ages ago. And I was training for a marathon then. I think I didn't complete the marathon. I think I did a half first of all, the New Forest half, which was really hard, actually. And I realised then the feeling that I got from the running, the training, and taking part, the achievement of it all, was something that I knew at that point, at 20 or so, that I needed that in my life, that was a good, positive experience rather than what I was doing, to cope with stress otherwise. So I think I was aware of it. It took me a long time to phase out, one addiction, if you like. And I did try and run along, both of them alongside each other for a while, which was quite challenging. So yeah, it wasn't until 9 years ago that I stopped drinking completely, and just focused on becoming a much healthier person. And that's when the really crazy stuff started taking over, with the multiple Ironman and things like that. So yeah.
And when you set out and see a challenge, and just before we were talking about this, we're talking one challenge, the Arch to Arc, you almost said, I wish I'd never seen it, because then you saw this challenge and thinking, oh, what is it about a challenge that makes you think, I want to go and do 20 Ironmans in a row? I mean, nobody wakes up and thinks, hey, I want to do this. And it relates to business. Some people might wake up and go, I want to grow a business to 50 million from a million. It's the same. It's an extreme thing like that. And it'd be understanding how you get to that place where you suddenly wake up with, I want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's something for me. It's it's got to be something I don't think I can do. It's got to be something that gives me that feeling, that scares me, basically. If it doesn't give me that feeling, I'm not interested in doing it. So, I guess the Arch to Arc definitely has that, 100%. The Double Decca, I mean, I just didn't know. Yeah, again, I didn't know if I could do it. And it would be a case of, just having to get my head down, be super disciplined, and just crack on and see if I could get to the end. And there's so many obstacles along the way that are just so out of your control that you just, especially with something as long as that particular triathlon, there's certainly no guarantees, even if you're the best athlete in the world, that you're going to get through something like that. And again, it's the same with business. It's just, there's so many things, and you don't set out. I think for me, it was like I didn't set out to start an events company. I always wanted to be in business. That was always something very strong in me from an early age. I had my own graphic design business when I was 19. So business has always been super important to me. But the events company, that was purely accidental. And I guess I never sat down and just thought, oh yeah, I want to start up an extreme triathlon in North Wales. That never entered my head. It just happened because of the journey I was on at the time. So, yeah.
So you said it's a challenge that scares you. It's a challenge that doesn't feel possible. That's what excites you. Is that sense of,
and breaking it down,
and
just seeing, okay, so I feel like it's impossible at this point. So what can I do? How can I break it down so then it becomes possible? I find that a very satisfying thing to do, and I do that in every aspect of my life these days. Even if it's just something simple that I'm doing during the day that is hard, you just apply the same rule, break it down,
And talk us through that process, because I think that could be really helpful for other people out there, perhaps not doing extreme events, but doing something in the business that feels a bit uncomfortable, feels a bit challenging. What's the process you go through? And you could give an example of such when you went for the 20 Ironmans, a double decker.
I mean, I do visualization quite a lot. So if something is particularly challenging, I just sit down quietly with a bit of paper, basically, and visualize how I see the whole process going, regardless of whether it's a triathlon I'm taking part of, or organizing, or anything that's difficult. I just visualize how I think it's going to go. And then anything that I think might be a problem that crops up during that visualization, I then just write it down, basically, and just think, okay, so if that happens, so if I get a mechanical, and I'm in Mexico, there's only so much stuff you can take over there. How am I going to deal with that? So, and then I just write down, do I need to do a quick course on, changing, certain things like with the chain or anything like that? Do I need to? So I'm covered with everything. So I can basically control everything that I can control. There's going to be things that you just can't control, like the weather. We had a lot of crazy weather in Mexico, and it was just a case of getting through that. And that just comes down to being, mentally strong. But all the things that crop up when I'm sort of thinking about it, right, can I control that? No. Okay, but if I can control that, what do I need to do to ensure that I'm the best prepared? And it's the same with events when I'm organizing them. Can we control weather on snow, football can we put in place to ensure that the event can carry on when the weather gets bad, because it always does. Yeah.
So in that visualization, is this like a 10, 20-minute thing, or is this a process that you do over a few days and you think through every aspect of that particular event or that particular aspect of your life of a challenge?
Probably just a 5-10 minute thing that I do. I just sit down and just break it down. Yeah, and go through it.
Because we know a lot of this, or the high elite athletes use visualizations a lot, and I've talked about it a lot, where more and more people in business are starting to use it. And it's interesting how you mentioned in essence that sort of visualization where you're looking for what could go wrong visualization as well, almost the sort of pitfalls, not just it's all about the goal, and that's helpful sometimes, but actually what's more helpful is understanding at different points along that race or event what could be a problem, and then think about how do I mitigate that, what the plans, almost the sort of the fallback plans, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I can't. People were saying to me with the Arch to Arch stuff, I needed to visualize myself getting across the channel and getting to Paris, and I couldn't do it. And that might be because I'm just not ready yet, but I just couldn't visualize that aspect of it. But it was the other bits that I was visualizing. So when I start having problems with my feet during the run, how am I going to cope with that? And in the swim, when I start feeling sick, how am I going to cope with that sort of stuff? So that's how I do it. I don't visualize the whole getting across the finish line stuff. I know I should. No. I probably should, but I struggle with that thing.
Well, what you're doing is what they call process visualization. So you're basically visualizing the process piece, and often in life it's we get sometimes too caught up on the outcome, but actually it's the process that bit's going to get you there. The day by day, the habits, the step in front of each other is going to get you across the line. And I think that's really helpful to do in life, is that visualization, and to sort of break things down and really try to understand what is happening and what could happen, and then sort of mitigate it. I like that. So if I was to ask you, out of all the events that you've done to date, what would you rate as your toughest event?
I mean, the double decker certainly was tough, but I think maybe I recently did the tour, which we were discussing earlier. I say recent, it was last year or year before, where I had to do 164 miles over the coast path. And
that's the South Coast Path, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge amount of climb, and I was doing it self-supported, and I had all my stuff on my back, and it basically took me. I'm terrible with remembering how long things took me. I think it took me about 5 days because I couldn't run. So I decided because I couldn't run, I decided to kind of punish myself and make it harder by carrying all the stuff on my back, and sleeping rough on the coast path and things like that. And I have problems with like nerve issues with my back, which sort of translates into pain in my feet. And I was in real pain, like proper pain, the sort of pain that I just couldn't, it's very difficult to deal with, and no painkillers kind of help because it's nerve pain and stuff. But I think that was probably one of the hardest, because there were so many times when I just didn't know. There was no joy in what I was doing at that point. It was just all about pain management and things like that. So that for me was particularly difficult. And the same with the joggle when I did that, and that was self-supported when I ran from Scotland to Cornwall, and I had all my stuff in a pushchair, which made me look particularly crazy, I have to say. People that are baby. But again, that was very, very difficult because it was just relentless pain in my feet, and every day would start off okay, and it would just get steadily worse by the end of the day, and I'd have to just stay strong the whole time, and and there was nobody around me to sort of give me pep talks or anything like that. It was very much as in when you're in business, there are so many times when you're just like completely on your own, and there's nobody there, like, to give you a hug or say it's going to be okay. You just have to see that, not everything stays the same, and you just have to just get on, do the next 10 miles or do the next whatever, and the situation will hopefully look better in that time. So yeah, I think it was the last two events where I've been mainly on my feet and I've had a lot of problems with the pain, they've definitely been particularly challenging for me. And
I'm sure with the tour, those 5 days probably felt like a long 5 days. And trying to handle that pain management, as much as also the drugs wasn't working. How did you deal with that? And how do you say, oh, just next 10 miles? Because you're not being forced to do this. You're doing it out of choice.
Yeah.
How did you sort of do those next 10 miles? And what was it in your mindset? What were those? What did you? I can't remember the guy's name. Talks about the cookie jar. What was your cookie jar of resilience experience that you pulled out and went, that got me going? What were those things, tips or ideas that you got through?
I mean, for the tour and the jogger, it was just a case of, I mean, the jogger, I used to kind of aim for about 40 miles a day. So it would be like the first 10 miles were great because my feet didn't hurt. And then it would just steadily kind of, deteriorate throughout the day. And it was just, again, breaking it down and ticking things off. I don't think I necessarily thought about things that I'd achieved in the past so much. I mean, a lot of the times I'm thinking about the people that I'm raising money for and things like that. That really does help. The tour was for a lovely guy called Alex, who'd done my Wanner event. And he had motor neurone disease at the time. He's since passed. And I remember there was a point on Portland when I was on the way back, and it did actually look like I was going to complete it this time, because that was my third attempt of doing it within about 6 weeks. I just kept trying. I was so determined to try and get
within
it done.
6 weeks. You tried three attempts.
Yeah, and I was selling my house at the time. Just the stupidest. The whole moving thing was quite easy because I just wasn't very focused on it, because I was just trying to get this tour done. And I remember Alex saying it was his birthday, and he was in quite a poorly state at that point, and he was trying to read my book and trying to get it finished, which I was just really flattered by. And I remember him saying that was his task of the day. He was trying to finish. And obviously reading was quite difficult for him at that point. And I remember thinking, it just put it in perspective, which I do quite a lot as well. When I'm really struggling with something, I quite often look at somebody who's doing something which is much harder, which puts my efforts into perspective and helps me cope with things as well. So I think at that point, when Alex said what he was doing, it didn't take the pain away from me, but it took, it put a huge perspective on what he was going through and what I was going through. So that is definitely a coping mechanism that I use.
It's like almost reframing something, isn't it? Almost
it's not taking away of what I was doing. What I was doing was quite hard.
No.
But, what Alex was doing and going through was really far more important.
But we know that it's a mental game. All this, it's not about the physical thing. I know you were getting physical pain. I'm not saying that was not horrible, but it's the mental piece, and it's the power of the mind. And by reframing, saying that actually what you were doing was, in a sense, lesser to what your friend was going through, actually made it easier for you to sort of cope with that mentally. And I think that's a great lesson for us sometimes, to not compare ourselves. It's not about comparing, but it's just to reframe. I know often my wife will be doing a half Ironman, and she'll just say, well, at least I'm not doing an Ironman today. And it just lessens the sort of, it makes it more insignificant in a sense, in a healthy way. So you then just deal with it better. And so you made 3 attempts at the tour in a matter of 6 weeks, which sounds quite relentless. What kept you going to try and keep going and to sort of achieve that? I mean, that's pretty, a lot of resilience, a lot of determination, and to get back up again. What did you learn each time? Because obviously for me, resilience is the getting back up again, but it's also the learning piece, isn't it? Because each time we do something, we need to learn. So each time what did you learn from those 2 attempts before where you'd failed?
Well, foot management, we're talking blisters here, not the pain I have, but the foot management. The first time I did it, I didn't realize how dry the coast path was. So I was wearing off-road trainers, and because I was trying to pack quite light, because the pack I had was like 25 pounds, I didn't take any spare trainers. So it was like, at that point, the off-road shoes that I had were really quite harsh. And the blisters that I had at 50 miles, I knew realistically I couldn't continue on at that point. So then that's the first lesson. The second, I think that was just down to pain again with that one. And I think, yeah, it was. And I think because I was trying to do it in such a much quicker time, the second time I mean, I kind of said to everyone, that's it, I'm not doing it again. I can't do it. I think because the pain was too much and I couldn't break it down. And then I thought back to the joggle and I thought, well, if I completed the joggle, which was 800 and whatever miles, why can't I do this? And I knew the pack wasn't helping, but that was just, I had to get on with that. So I think then with the tour, I decided that no matter how long it took me, I was just going to do it. So I thought, and when the pain gets too much, like I did with the joggle, I just used to stop, put my tent up and get off my feet. So then I applied that to the tour and just thought, well, however long it takes. And I think also because I was moving to Portland and I had this vision of like, if I didn't do it, every day I'd get up and look out at those bloody cliffs and be like, they beat me. So there was a huge part of obviously because I was moving. And I just thought, no, before I move, I've got to get this done. And obviously Alex was a massive part of that as well. But yeah, I think I just applied that whole, no matter how long it took at that point, which was hard because as someone who runs brutal events, I feel sometimes people, and it's probably wrong, expect me to be better or faster. And I just couldn't be faster. So it was just like, right, just get it done, no matter how long it took, which is why it took like 5 days.
Well, that's an important lesson, isn't it? It's not about sometimes the speed and the time of achieving something, as long as you get it done.
Yeah, it's like adapting, isn't it? Basically, it's looking at it and going, okay, so it's not going to get done. I'm not going to be able to do it in 60 hours. I'm just not that kind of athlete. And so, yeah, it's going to take me 5 days. And that's what happens.
And often, sometimes we take on a challenge or a goal in our lives that we don't know that the full picture of what that means until we're in it. And then we realize, it's either tougher or we weren't quite prepared, but also we get challenges on the way, whether that's physical things or weather or external factors that you can't control. And it's that importance of modifying and adapting, not getting caught up on the time frame, but getting caught up on how can I modify and adapt here to achieve my outcome. Whether it takes me 2 days to 5 days, ultimately, you pursue through, 3 times it took you to get there, but you got there, and that's quite it's a massive achievement. It's huge. In those, and it could be in all the event, in that event particularly, what did you learn about yourself? Because I'm sure in those moments of being on your own a lot of the time, what was your sort of head chatter like, and what did you think and learn as you were going through all this about yourself?
I think over the years I've become more positive. I think I used to be, it's quite easy to get into that negative spiral when you're feeling low. I've learned that when I start getting negative internally, I need to eat most of the time. I'm not very good at eating, so I quickly pick up on that. If I start getting negative and I start thinking, oh, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this anymore. Quite often it's because my blood sugar's dropped. It's very simple. And I eat and I have a little bit of a rest and then I, start again. So yeah, I just try and remain as positive as you can. Sometimes it's not that easy. And sometimes just having a good cry or a good shout and swear, it's okay to do that. And I've learned that's fine. It's just trying to stay as positive as possible, I think, is my thing over the years. Because having struggled with addiction, with alcohol, you can be, you are a negative person when you're in that situation. And it's part of the whole thing. It's you very much a, poor me situation. And I think I fight these days to always remain as positive as I can, no matter what I'm doing. Even if it's something like doing something for the business when there's a particular challenge like COVID, or I'm buying a house or anything like that. I'm always like, right, so this has happened. This isn't great, but how can I spin it? How can I turn it positive? How can I get through it? And I try not to. With the business, I used to see when we used to have problems, it used to be like, oh my God, what's happening now? This is awful, and why is this always happening to me? And this now I'm like, oh, okay, so this has happened. And it's not that bad. And blowing it out of proportion, break it down. I've been through worse, and see it as a challenge rather than an obstacle.
So that's how you deal with that in the moment stuff when it's coming at you quite negative.
Yeah, I really enjoy troubleshooting. So if things happen, it's like, okay, so like literally when I was doing the joggle, the wheel of I had a baby jogger, so it's like a proper running pushchair, and it's got 3 wheels. So I used to have them when I did have babies, so I knew about them. They were pretty good. So I had all my stuff in it, and it was pretty heavy actually, because people were sort of like helping me out along the way and giving me like biscuits and cake, and it was just getting laden down. And one day, sort of just through Hereford, I watched the wheel kind of, it was like a slow motion thing. The wheel just broke off and just went on its way. And it was like literally the wheels have come off. And so straight away, I was just like, right, my brain went into troubleshooting mode. It's like, what can I do? I need to find somebody to help. I need to find somebody who can help fix it. If it can't be fixed, I need a Bergen. So, the challenge is going to change at that point. It's not going to be with me with pushchair. I'm going to have to ditch that. I'm going to have to put my stuff, half it probably, and put it into a Bergen so I can complete the challenge. So straight away, that was just me doing that straight away. I didn't even have to sit down and have a cry or anything. I was like, right, how are we going to push on with that? So I really enjoy that side of business, endurance stuff, is the troubleshooting. How can we get out of this? I really like that side of things.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because resilience is a lot about problem solving, isn't it? It's about being creative, about thinking of different ideas, and often doing things you've never done before to navigate a situation. And I know we've all been through the last couple of years where people are doing things differently because they still want to achieve what they want to achieve, but things got in the way. And I think that's an important lesson, to actually problem solving is quite key with resilience, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I really, really enjoy it.
Brilliant. And so you've obviously, I don't like the word failure, because I think sometimes it's often just feedback along the way. But when you have done failures, like 3 attempts at the tour, I'm sure there's other stuff. How have you dealt when you got to the end of, say, one of the tours and you didn't complete it? How did you deal with that sort of failure at that point? What do you do? Do you go off for the day, or do you just crack on with other things? How do you process things?
I used to deal with failure quite badly, and it used to be a thing, and it would trigger me, and I'd get quite depressed and fed up, and do the whole like thing where you just beat yourself up and things like that. And because I've failed so many times now with things over the years, it doesn't bother me like it used to. I always ensure that I figure out what went wrong and why I didn't complete it. So I always make a list of what can I do better next time, and just have a few days where I kind of look after myself a bit, and accept also that you're going to go through a couple of days of feeling a bit low, and not beat yourself up with that either. It's okay to be a bit sad. So when I postponed the Arch to Arc this year, I was a bit low for a couple of days, but I knew I was gonna I think I was a bit concerned about what people thought, because I've been trying to do this event for so long. I was a bit like, are people going to think that I'm just making excuses and things like that? And so there's definitely a process of feeling a bit low. And then I thought, actually, I've done all this training. What can I do? And so I went to Windermere and swam Windermere. I was quite lucky that there was an available slot. And so I did something positive, which didn't have to be quite as big as swimming Windermere, but I did something positive, which kind of just reinforced that I was still on this journey. And okay, it didn't happen this year because of X, Y, Z, and I know exactly why it didn't happen. So that's fine. So I put that to bed, did something positive. I had myself a few weeks where I just sort of chilled out a little bit, and now I'm back on training for it again. And so just continuing on with everything. But it's important to go through those steps, I think, not get caught up in the self-pity spiral, where you're like, poor me sort of stuff. But yeah, that was important.
And how do you not give up? I mean, you have this ability to obviously bounce back from failure, learn from failure. You do in the moment problem solving to navigate challenges as you're doing events. But how do you decide? When do you decide that I'm not going to continue with this? Do you ever decide that? Do you ever think, actually, the Arch to Arc, I'm not going to do it, it's just not for me, or whatever? Does that ever enter your heads?
It has done. There has been times, especially with the Arch to Arc, because it's so challenging. It's a very difficult event, even if you like sea swimming. If you don't particularly like sea swimming and you're not very good at it, and you have a lot of issues with cold water and panic attacks and stuff, it makes a hard thing much harder. But I think, again, I'm just drawn to things like that. I'm so determined, I think, stubborn, I think is probably a good word, is that, a lot of people I think would have given up by now and just been like, do you know what, it's just not for me. And there's definitely been times when I've just said that, and people have said to me, the guy who runs it has said to me, you don't have to do this. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You've done all right. And I'm like, I know, but I can do it. I just need to train a bit harder on this aspect. This is still weak. I need to do more of that. And this year I found myself swimming in waters that I have never thought I'd swim in. Seas that I would have just driven down and gone, nope, and got back in my van and driven off. And I've not just got in there, I've been swimming, proper swimming in really choppy waters. So you can progress. To do that, if you'd have said that even a year ago, I'd have been like, no. Because you won't swim like that in the channel, they wouldn't put you. But you have to know what it feels like. So I can see how far I've progressed, even if sometimes it still feels like years away, or even if I may never actually do it. It's such a difficult event, but I'm not going to stop trying, for sure.
Fantastic. So in terms of what is next for you, is that your next sort of big event you're doing? Is there any other things you've got in the pipeline?
For me, definitely the arch to arc is the biggest thing, without a doubt.
And do you see it as a bigger than sort of double decker?
Yeah, and people say that to me. Like, I've got a friend who's a really good triathlete, and he's like, I don't understand. The double decker is so much harder than the arch to arc, and I'm like, it absolutely isn't. And it just depends on what your strengths are. I mean, there's two different ways you can do a decker or a double decker. You can do the one a day, which is an Ironman every single day, or you can do the way I did, which was all of the swim in one go, all of the bikes, the continuous format. I find the continuous format easier because I can manage it a lot better. With the one a day, you have a deadline every single day, and if you don't hit that, if you don't finish that Ironman, you are out. And I have failed that event. I mean, I think I've tried to do it like 7 times, but that has to get done too. So that's going to be done at some point. I won't give up with that. But with that one, it just boils down to speed. I've just got to get faster. And that comes down to my training and consistency with my training, which is a weakness with me. I'm not very consistent, and that's something I've had to really work on, and that I'm continuing to work on this year and next year, is that, I've got to keep training properly rather than having like 2 weeks where you train crazy and then nothing for another 2 weeks. I'm really good at that. So yeah, training consistency is a big thing for me. And I think if I had that, there's a few things that I could tick off that I've failed at that I want to get done still.
So there's still a few biggies out there that you want to overcome, which is great. And I love your attitude of, seeing it as almost impossible. Actually, well, let's see if I can make it possible.
Yeah.
And I like that attitude and that sort of way to try and figure it out. Everything's figure outable, isn't it?
Yeah,
and in some shape, it doesn't always matter. The timing bit is the bit it doesn't matter when the timing happens. And in terms of what I guess to distill probably into one lesson or one learning of all what you've been through, what would be your advice to somebody who is perhaps facing a challenge and perhaps having multiple attempts? What would be your pep talk to them, I suppose? And I'm sure you've done this to many people you meet anyway, but what would be how you'd encourage them to keep going?
To set something up, or when they were in the moment of actually
when they're in the moments, and doing it.
In the moment, I mean, again, it's staying positive. Always, I mean, keeping a sense of humor is massively important. When I pick crew, for when I'm doing hard things, that crew, obviously for the experience of endurance stuff is useful, but I need them to be able to have a sense of humor. That's so important throughout everything that I do. All my crew on my brutal events, they've all got to be able to obviously be serious when we need to be, but a lot of it is keeping things light, keeping things positive, having a laugh when things get hard, because they will get hard. There will be tears, and so being able to laugh at the situation is very important, and keep it in perspective as well. But breaking things down, that's my biggest thing in life. In everything that I do, is just when things seem a little bit challenging or really, really challenging, break it down. If you're trying to swim the channel, it's literally, they always say swim feed to feed. And it can be even, we were talking about my attempt is breaking it down even more so. So we were going to have a whiteboard message system so people could give me some messages of encouragement. So we were going to do like a whiteboard message on like, every quarter of an hour, every half an hour, and then feeding every half an hour. So basically every quarter of an hour I'd have something to kind of keep me going, which is the ultimate in breaking something down to try and keep me positive and keep me strong throughout it. So yeah, I think that would be the one thing that my most important thing is just breaking it down.
It's breaking down the elephant, isn't it, so to speak, they say, into small pieces.
Yeah.
There's a quote that you in your book, and it's by Winston Churchill, and I'd like you to expand upon why you've put this in. If you're going through hell, keep going. Put yourself in positions of hell, I guess, or situations where it's pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, I love that saying because it is just throughout my life. It doesn't mean, when I'm doing something stupid like 20 marathons, whatever, it's, more so in times when I've gone through real hardship in my personal life. Nothing stays the same, and you just have to continue on and just keep, pushing yourself through, even if it's just keep getting up each day and, making a cup of coffee, sitting down, making a to-do list, which is real simple. Just keep going and keep making forward progress. And that's, I think, so important in life through everything.
Well, Claire, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and you might appear on the outside a very crazy lady, but there's a lot of great wisdom in how you go about things and how you break things down, how you reframe, and how you learn from each event and keep going. And there's lessons there, whether you're doing an ultra event through to managing a business or our personal lives. It doesn't matter. They're all completely transferable, and you're doing it in your personal life as well and your own business. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming on the show today. If people want to connect with you and want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
I've got a website, brutalclaire.co.uk. So that's a good way. Or Instagram, brutalclaire. That's probably, another way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today, Claire.
Thanks for having me.